especially when it's for work. About a year ago, I had to spend several days in a small town about 3 hours away from my office. People always talked about how beautiful the area was, so I thought it would be the perfect excuse to bring my wife with me. She hated when I traveled for work, and this way she could spend the days exploring while I worked. Then we'd have every evening together. We rented a small, cozy house surrounded by tall trees. It wasn't completely isolated, but the nearest neighbors were hidden behind thick woods. The first night felt perfect. While we were unpacking, my wife smiled and said, "I could actually see us living somewhere like this." The house wasn't large, but it had one unusual feature: a huge unfinished basement filled with old shelves, storage boxes, and furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Neither of us thought much about it. We should have. The next morning, I woke up around 6. The first thing I noticed, my wife wasn't in bed. My heart immediately started racing. I hurried into the kitchen where I found her sitting alone, drinking coffee while staring at her phone. She looked exhausted. When I asked why she was awake so early, she hesitated before answering. She told me she had woken up sometime during the night. When she opened her eyes, she thought she saw someone standing silently in the corner of the bedroom. She blinked several times, trying to focus. The room was too dark to be sure. She rolled over, convinced she had imagined it. But only a few minutes later, she heard a faint sound coming from the exact same corner. After that, she couldn't fall asleep again. She said she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching her the entire night. By 5 in the morning, she'd given up trying to sleep and made herself coffee. I could tell she wasn't joking. She looked genuinely frightened. I had to leave for work. Before I left, I asked if she'd be okay spending the morning alone. She smiled weakly and said she'd get ready and head into town as soon as possible. She didn't want to stay inside the house any longer than necessary. I kissed her goodbye. She stepped into the shower. A few minutes later, something happened that neither of us has ever been able to explain. After getting out of the shower, she noticed the clothes she'd carefully folded on the bed looked different. Instead of being stacked neatly, they had been unfolded halfway and spread across the mattress in a messy line. At first, she convinced herself she simply remembered wrong. Then she reached for her socks. They were gone. Completely gone. She searched everywhere. Nothing. Feeling increasingly uneasy, she grabbed another pair from her suitcase, got dressed as quickly as she could, and left the house. She called an Uber into town since I had taken the car. Throughout the morning, she barely texted me. Every reply was one word. That wasn't like her. I managed to leave work early and met her for lunch. The moment I saw her, I knew something was wrong. She told me everything. The figure in the bedroom, the clothes, the missing socks. I believed every word she said. I just couldn't explain any of it. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking around town, hoping some fresh air would make us forget about the strange events. For a while, it actually worked. That evening, we returned to the house. We cooked dinner together. She laughed again. Everything finally felt normal. We both convinced ourselves we'd simply been letting our imaginations get the better of us. Then, around 2 in the morning, she suddenly grabbed my arm and whispered, "Did you hear that?" Most business trips are predictable. Check into the hotel, attend meetings, order takeout, sleep, then head home. But one trip completely changed the way I look at hotels forever. I arrived late in the evening after driving for nearly 5 hours. The lobby was almost empty. The receptionist looked exhausted as she handed me my keycard and apologized for the long wait. Nothing seemed unusual. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and found my room at the end of a quiet hallway. As soon as I unlocked the door, something felt wrong. The room wasn't dark. A bedside lamp was already on. At first, I assumed housekeeping had simply forgotten to turn it off. Then I noticed something else. An open suitcase. Men's shoes beside the bed. A half-empty bottle of water on the nightstand. Someone was already staying in the room. I slowly backed into the hallway and closed the door without making a sound. Thinking the hotel had made a simple mistake, I returned to the front desk. The receptionist frowned as she looked at her computer. She insisted that room was supposed to be empty. A few moments later, another employee checked the reservation system. Both of them looked confused. Eventually, they apologized, gave me a different room, and assured me everything was fine. I tried to laugh it off. Mistakes happen, right? The next morning, while checking out, I casually asked another employee what had happened with that room. His expression immediately changed. He quietly asked, "Which room number did they give you first?" I told him. He stared at me for a few seconds before lowering his voice. "That room hasn't been rented in days." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. According to him, no guest had officially checked into that room since earlier in the week. The hotel never figured out who the suitcase belonged to. Security cameras never showed anyone entering that room after it had been cleaned. Even stranger. When housekeeping returned later that night, the suitcase was gone. No one saw anyone leave. No one ever claimed the belongings. To this day, I still don't know whether someone had secretly been staying there, or if I walked into a room I was never supposed to enter. But there's one rule I've learned the hard way. Luxury doesn't always mean safe. A while back, I took a vacation to Costa Rica with the woman I was dating at the time. We decided to stay at one of the most beautiful resorts in the country. The place looked like paradise. Private beaches, luxury villas, palm trees, infinity pools overlooking the ocean. It was easily one of the nicest resorts I'd ever visited. The first 3 days were perfect. We spent our mornings exploring the island and our evenings relaxing by the beach. Everything felt peaceful, until the final night. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, neither of us could sleep. She suggested we walk down to the outdoor hot tub. It sounded like a great idea. The entire resort was silent. Most of the guests had already gone to bed. The pool area was almost empty. Only the sound of insects and distant ocean waves filled the air. We slipped into the hot water and talked for nearly 20 minutes. Then, I noticed someone standing across the pool. A man. He wasn't swimming. He wasn't relaxing. He was simply standing there, completely motionless, watching us. At first, I assumed he was another guest, but something about him felt wrong. He never looked away. Not once. Trying to ignore him, we continued talking. A few minutes later, he slowly began walking toward us. His movements were strangely calm, deliberate. He stopped only a few feet away, without saying a word, without smiling, without introducing himself. He simply stared at us. The silence became unbearable. Finally, I asked, "Can I help you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he quietly asked, "Are you staying here?" The question caught me off guard. I nodded. He looked at both of us for another few seconds, then turned around and walked away into the darkness. Neither of us said anything. We climbed out of the hot tub almost immediately and headed back toward our room. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following us. I glanced over my shoulder. The same man was standing near the pathway. Again. Watching us. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply waited until we disappeared inside our building. We locked every door, closed every curtain, and barely slept that night. The next morning, while checking out, I casually mentioned the strange man to one of the resort employees. His expression changed instantly. He asked me where we'd seen him. After I explained, he became unusually quiet. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're not the first guest to report someone matching that description." I asked if the man worked at the resort. He shook his head. No, he doesn't. I never found out who that man was, or why he seemed so interested in us. But one thing is certain. Every time I think about that beautiful resort, I don't remember the beaches or the sunsets. I remember the man who stood silently beside the pool, watching us in the middle of the night.